Well, I guess it's time for a weekly confessional or something. But I don't have wine. Cheers! Welcome back, everybody, to me doing a weekly navel-gazing where we talk about all the stuff I didn't do last week, and then I start complaining about my incredibly brutal life. Sort of. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about all the books I read and the books I plan to read this week and stuff like that. And videos I've tried to make, and videos I actually made, and you know the drill. So yeah, that's what we'll do. And let's start with the reading, because that was pretty good. Because I mostly did what I said I would do. I continued reading the Black Company novels. I am now done with She is the Darkness, so I guess I also read Bleak Seasons and Dreams of Steel, because I was done with Shadow Games, I think, last week? I don't know. See, time is weird. So I did all of that, and they're obviously all brilliant, and it allows me to soon get back and talk about, finally, Water Sleeps and Soldiers Live, and possibly Port of Shadows. We will see. So that was pretty successful. And then on Tuesday, Navola by Paolo Bacigalupi came out, and I read that, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I also, continued reading books on my, academic books on my current project. In this case, a collection of essays about Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code that was incredibly terrible. It's a really bad book by a probably sort of predatory pseudo-academic publisher. I didn't know that before. I finished it, and I did the thing that I rarely do. I wrote a Goodreads review for it. It's a 1-star review. Yeah, it's a bad book, but stuff's got to be done, and that's what I'll do. And I obviously finally made some major progress in Anti-Intellectualism in American Life by Richard Hofstadter, which is a much better book. So there's that. What else did I read? Well, I started rereading the Decameron by one Boccaccio from the 14th century for that important celebration of 1348 subscribers. But it's a big book, so I'm not yet fully done, and I hope that the subscriber numbers won't get up. I shouldn't say that, like and subscribe, right? But seriously, I'll try to be done with it soon, but I don't know if you've ever read the Decameron. It's a collection of 100 stories, right? And the audiobook is like 30 hours, so yeah, it takes a while to get through that. But I'm mostly done with it, and I guess you'll hear me maybe talk about the Decameron soon-ish. So that's all the stuff I read, which is, quite a bit. So let's talk about what I plan to read this week. Yeah, and this is obviously a good question. I think I'll finish the Decameron, and I'll read The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman, which comes out tomorrow, so possibly I'll start it tomorrow, depends on how quickly I get, done with the Decameron. And, after that, things get interesting. Obviously, I'll read Water Sleeps and I'll read Soldiers Live. I'll also possibly have to read A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge for my offline book club, if we finally settle on a date, because that sort of means I'll have to read it 2 days before we talk about it or something. Should I do that? Maybe I'll talk about it in a video as well. We'll find out. Beyond that, there's obviously more academic stuff for the project. I have a number of additional books that I think I should probably finish reading before I can finally get to the recording part, but that's sort of what I have as books that I want to read. I probably should also reread finally The State of the Art, so we can continue with the whole culture thing. So that's reading plans. They're pretty exciting, aren't they? So let's talk about videos, right? Well, I did in fact make one video. I made a video for Navola and or Navola, depending on how you pronounce it. Yeah, for Navola. And I did, I'm happy with the video. There's a minor mistake there which annoyed me, but that's more like me being, slow or whatever. It's all good. I think it's a pretty solid discussion of a really interesting book. Obviously, with doing spoiler-filled discussions of new books like 2 days after they come out is a bit of a risky move because most people won't have read the book by then, right? Except they're those of us who have either had like arcs and done like proper reading in advance, or were like me and started reading it immediately on on publication day, as soon as the pre-order in this case popped up in my Audible library, which is apparently 9 a.m. So I guess 9 a.m. tomorrow I'll get the Bright Sword. Doesn't put any pressure on me. Anyway, so I made a video all about Navola, and then or Navel, and then I didn't do anything else because stuff. And I think that's mainly the problem. Like, I obviously thought about doing another video, and then it wasn't fast enough with the Decameron thing, so that just took longer because the book is just like so big. And over the weekend, I, went on a pub crawl with friends, and that obviously had some impact on my ability to be productive the next day, and, no second video. I hope I'll be better this week, which is obviously the question, like, what videos will come this week? Well, I guess a video on the Decameron, if I figure out how to do that, which we'll kind of get to in a second. The other part is, of course, a video on the Bright Sword, because I think, all right, I feel this weird obligation to talk about the Bright Sword, even though I'm not necessarily, I don't have the biggest emotional draw to reading the Bright Sword, but after the whole Arthurian video thing last year, I feel sort of like I should probably talk about a new big Arthurian novel, because I've done all the preparatory work already, so maybe that'll help, because I guess I'm somewhat qualified to talk about Arthurian fiction by this day. So that's sort of something that forces me it comes into my self-image in a lot of ways. I know I'm probably not seen as the authority on Arthurian fiction on BookTube. I know there's other booktubers out there who have made videos on the subject that probably have way more respect in the larger BookTube watching community, and that's fine. But in my self-image, I'm I made a 4-hour video on Arthurian fiction. I guess I have to read the big new Arthurian book that is coming out right now by an author as popular, or at least as well known as Lev Grossman, because of his novels, the Magician's trilogy, which got a big TV show and was successful. And so, seeing what Grossman has to do with gets up to with Arthurian fiction might be worthwhile. So that's why I'll definitely talk about the Bright Sword once I've read it, and we'll see how deeply I can go in that discussion, whether I'll be positively impressed by this book or incredibly annoyed, which is certainly something that can happen here. So that's a video that will hopefully happen next week, depending on how long it takes to get through that book, which is, once again, a pretty big one. It's the audiobook is 24 hours. So I guess even with speeding up some parts, at least, may take a while to get through that. So we'll see. Certainly will happen, but And then there's obviously the other videos that I try to hopefully do, which will be, the state of the art if I get to it, depending on how fast I get through the Bright Sword and whether I have to read Fire Upon the Deep first. I'll also try to get to Water Sleeps. I don't want to let this slide too long, or otherwise I'll once again not make those videos, which would be bad. And then on Saturday, of course, there will be the live stream, the monthly. It's going to be this weekend, because next weekend, if all goes well, I'll be at Headbangers Open Air, and that means no live stream. So we'll do this on the 20th. And should you, despite the summer, have nothing else to do and want to, just hang out and talk about stuff and maybe have a beer or whatever, then please join me for the live stream. This time round, I don't have a guest. I'll try to have one maybe next month, although August will be quite the interesting time with, more festivals and stuff. So we'll see if I manage to actually have a live stream, and if I can wrangle someone in as a guest, which is obviously its own challenge of figuring out who to ask, overcoming my awkwardness to actually ask, and see how these things go. But, depending on whom I come up with, and maybe I'll find someone. We'll see. So yes, live stream definitely happening. It's already up, so you can already bookmark it for Saturday, and a video on the Decameron if I get lucky, and a video on The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. And I think to keep wandering off into weird territory here is like, I've definitely been stalling when it comes to videos, and the Decameron one kind of shows why, I think, in an interesting way that we can then hopefully map onto what is going on with the big one, right? I think it's the question of like how to say things, and this goes back to like a larger issue that I've always had, which is I have huge problems with like committing to anything definite in all kinds of ways, but in particular when it comes to writing, or in this case saying stuff. I have these big, wonderful ideas in my head that I'm like, wow, this is awesome, and the full argument is there behind my eyes, and it's beautiful, but it's also fluid, right? Because none of the words have yet been set down or said aloud, and that makes a huge difference. And for whatever reason, I have this like idea that I have to get stuff completely right, which is, were I say a writer, I obviously would have to do that at some point, which is, the danger of revisions, of ultimate revisions, and going on and doing it again. But it's sort of built in, right? It's like the idea that you can always revise stuff and change words if they're not perfect. That's something that writing offers that videos not technically do if you're really good with editing. Like, for example, in the Navola video, I make that. The video is called, titled Dancing on the Shoulders of Giants, which I thought is a really neat image. I only came up with that image after I recorded the video. I said something slightly different in the video, which in hindsight, I'm like, fuck, I should have said dancing. It makes much more sense for a better image. But I didn't. And I didn't want to go back and re-edit that thing and just like shoot that stuff, because I'm not good at editing, so that kind of falls out of the right. There is that fear of getting things wrong that I often have, and that's certainly something that is part of the fear that I have with like the larger video projects. Now with the Decameron, for example, I'm sitting here like, well, it's it's a classic. It's got 100 stories. It's been out for 700, 800 years now, almost. It's quite the thing. So what do I do? Do I just like talk about like why I think it's a fun book? Do I try to add sort of like deeper information? The trap there is, of course, that as soon as I decide to do a more informative video, I'll have to do research, and we all know how I handle research, right? So that's so I'm trying to figure out how to do something that I feel will be entertaining for you to watch and sort of worth your time. And that's definitely something that I'm struggling with. So I still have sort of some insecurities around the Decameron thing, because, yeah, that's one of those, like, probably one of the most studied, classic texts of the last 1,000 years in a lot of ways. Getting it wrong, fucking up, and not coming across as as someone to be trusted, a trustworthy source, I guess, is sort of in my mind. I obviously can overplay that by doing a joke, right? Playing it all off, being ironic, all that stuff. But that only works sometimes. It kind of works with the Decameron. I can do something fun there, because the stakes are relatively low. And this kind of is sort of like where I want to tie this all back. Brings me to to the big one, the conspiracy fiction video. There, at least in my head, the stakes are higher. See, I'm not making that video just to shit on Dan Brown, which, there's enough videos out there doing that. I have a larger sort of message or argument around paranoia in society right now, about how conspiracy belief has sort of come back in a big way in parts of mainstream fiction, and in part of like mainstream discourse in general, and that's the stakes are higher. I gotta get this thing right. At least in my mind. Obviously, once again, if only like 500 people watch the video afterwards, who cares? But that's not how it works, right? I potentially put this out there for the entire rest of the world to see, and then I gotta get it right. And that means getting the words right, and that means that it's much easier to continue playing around with that sort of image in my head of the entire argument, that wonderful castle, a thought castle that I've built in my head of the entire argument. And it stays fluid as long as I keep doing that, and I can do more research, and then that leads to sort of embellishing parts of it and coming up with neat ideas that also fit in there from time to time. But the main thing here is that I don't want to commit, because as soon as that stuff's edited, that stuff's recorded, that stuff's out there, there's no going back at that point. And what if I fuck up? What if... And that fear is so deep in everything I do, which is, why I stopped writing academic essays, because I just couldn't get words on the page anymore. It's I don't know why that is, but it's certainly been an important part. And part of this whole YouTube video project channel thing that I'm doing is also me trying to come back to the idea of finding ways to say things, to state things and make them at least somewhat final. And I've certainly had a rough week in that regard. I can feel myself starting to dawdle along the way and do other stuff and try to not do it. And as I said, I had a bunch of bad days where just minor irritants sort of piled up with, the usual being disabled or having a disability is not always fun, and sometimes those minor irritants kind of pile up, and you come to that moment where you're I'm not good for anything, no matter what I do, no matter how good I am, no matter how smart, strong, how much I work out, how much I read, whatever. I'll never add up to a full human being, which is obviously bullshit, but it's internalized ableism, and it's incredibly hard to get rid of that. And sometimes, you just have these dark months, or dark weeks, or dark moments. And I had a dark week in that regard, so that certainly didn't help with the idea of, with me being able and willing to actually commit to any statements on politics in a YouTube video. But I hope that maybe this week will be slightly better. I hope so. I've certainly... I think I'm getting near the end of research that I really need to do. I guess maybe one or two books that at least, want to look at one or two essays in those, and maybe I'll just not read the entire essay collection, but just the essays that I really need, and we'll see how that works out. And then maybe I can finally get to work on actually recording the whole thing. And wouldn't that be neat? But that's all up there in the air for the future. For now, it's the Decameron and the Bright Sword and so forth. Anyway, so what about you? What did you do? What did you read? What are you planning to do? What are you planning to read? Like and subscribe, do the wonderful things, tell me all these things in the comments, and I'll talk to you incredibly soon about, probably sex with priests, I guess, in large amounts. And I hope that sounds more exciting. Anyway, thanks and cheers.